Hey guys, I want to talk about fraud investigation. And this may be, you may be an insurance adjuster. I'm not trying to give anybody tips on what's being looked at, but these are things that they're looking at. And so if you ever have, say, a fire and you feel like, oh, they just don't want to pay for it, and they're accusing me of potentially or saying they're doing an investigation because they think I started the fire, and you feel like it's a delay tactic, it may not be. There are certain things that raises, red flags. Maybe yours is totally innocent, but insurance company has to make absolutely sure, because all fraud causes premiums to go up, and it causes a big loss to the insurance company, which, they pass on to us. So when investigating fraud, it's important to examine the financial records of the policyholder to determine whether it's a financial motive for the fire. Now, I worked on, as a trial paralegal, I worked on a claim where this lady had put candles out, and she had a cat, and her cat knocked the candles over, and a couple of them were sitting together and caused a fire in her house. It was significant, and of course insurance came back and said, we're not so sure about that. So they have to wait for the fire marshal to make a determination. That can take weeks. In the meantime, you're sitting around thinking that everybody's playing a game with you, but they have to do their due diligence. And if you owned an insurance company, you would be wanting them to do this as well. But what that can involve by determining if there's a financial motive in the fire is it can involve reviewing bank statements or tax returns or other financial documents to look for evidence to see if you were in financial distress or other financial problems that could have led you to want to commit arson. And maybe not even you. Maybe it was a boyfriend, maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a niece or nephew, or it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be you. They could have done it on your behalf. You may or may not have known about it. And there have been instances where one spouse has done it and the other spouse had no idea. But because if you're both on the policy as an insured, an additional insured, if your spouse started the fire and you didn't know anything about it, it doesn't necessarily negate you getting paid and insurance paying for your marital property. But some of the financial factors that investigators may look at when they're investigating the fraud include financial distress. They're trying to see if you're experiencing financial difficulties such as mounting debt or a recent job loss. That would give you a reason to set the fire in order to collect the insurance proceeds to pay off the debts or cover any expenses. But I'll just let you know why that would not be a good thing if you had a mortgage, because the mortgage company is a loss payee on that. Their name goes on the check. If you're behind on that note, they'll sit on it. If they will dole it out if they feel like you're not going to make the repairs, or maybe there's not enough money, the policy didn't cover everything, or it's an actual cash value policy, something along those lines. They may decide that they're going to use that money to pay your note off. And then, of course, if it's a replacement, if you use the money to pay your note off, well, then somehow you're going to have to borrow the money, because you can't get that back in money, that withheld recoverable, until you build it back and you spend as much money as insurance says. So kind of puts you in a catch-22. It's really important to work with your mortgage company if there's no fraud involved. I'm just letting you know that. Over insurance, if the policyholder had recently increased their insurance coverage, you hear this all the time on CSI murders. It's like, oh, the wife just took out an insurance policy on her husband before he mysteriously died, kind of thing. Well, they're looking for that. They're looking for claims that are filed shortly after the new policy was in place, or right after the house was purchased. Anything like that, an increase, something weird, you added something that wasn't there before. That could also be a sign of planning to commit an arson in order to collect a larger insurance payout. Recent purchases. If the policyholder had made large recent purchases, such as a new car or expensive jewelry, that can be a sign that they were planning to commit arson in order to collect the insurance proceeds to pay for these purchases. Business losses. If a policyholder owned a business that was struggling financially, they may have set the fire in order to collect insurance proceeds to cover those losses. I mean, you see a lot. Usually it's a financial reason why you're doing it, because I think anybody who would think this out probably wouldn't commit fraud. You can't think that you're smarter than an insurance company and all of its people and all of the investigators. But by examining the financial records of the policyholder, the fraud investigators often can uncover evidence of a financial motive for a fire, or say we were talking about boat insurance fraud. They can use it to build a case against a policyholder and to help deter others from doing it in the future. And then also, it doesn't, let's just say the insurance believes that you committed a fraud on, say, a fire, and they hand that information over to the district attorney. But the district attorney, for whatever reason, they're busy, they're liberal, they don't want to do it, they just don't want to, they don't want to pursue it. It doesn't mean that because you're not criminally charged or criminally found guilty, that insurance still has to pay. Insurance has its own independent investigation when they decide what they're going to pay or not pay. So if they believe that fraud was committed, you can't come back later and say, well, clearly I wasn't because I wasn't ever charged with the crime, or the charges were dropped, or a jury found me not guilty. That has no bearing necessarily on the fraud investigation, because they may say there's enough there that it can happen. If, say, insurance did that and you did not commit fraud and they're just whatever, you can go to an attorney and have your rights protected that way. In the meantime, stay safe and be prepared.